Oliver Grant adjusted his navy blue maintenance uniform as he finished his evening rounds on the rooftop helipad of Sterling Industries. At 38, he moved with a quiet precision that most people mistook for the careful attention of a dedicated janitor. Few noticed the way his eyes automatically scanned the aircraft, checking rotor assemblies and engine cowlings with the practiced gaze of someone who understood every bolt and wire. The golden hour light cast long shadows across the landing pad, where a sleek Robinson R-44 helicopter sat waiting for tomorrow's executive transport. Oliver had maintained this particular aircraft for 2 years, ensuring it remained in perfect condition for the company's high-profile flights. Behind him, the rooftop door opened with its familiar metallic clang. Isabel Sterling emerged, her dark hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, wearing a tailored charcoal business suit that marked her as someone accustomed to command. At 34, she had inherited Sterling Industries from her father and transformed it into one of the city's most successful consulting firms. "Oliver," she called out, her voice carrying the crisp authority she used in boardrooms. "I need this helicopter ready for an early departure tomorrow. 7 a.m. sharp." Oliver turned, offering the respectful nod he'd perfected over years of service work. "Yes, Ms. Sterling. Pre-flight inspection is complete. She's ready to go." Isabel approached the aircraft, running her manicured fingers along the fuselage. "You know, Oliver, I've always wondered something about you." "Yes, ma'am?" "You clean this helicopter like you actually know what you're looking at," she said, her tone carrying a hint of amusement. "Most janitors would just wipe it down and call it done. But you actually check things. The rotors, the engine compartments, the landing gear." Oliver kept his expression neutral. "I believe in doing a thorough job, Mrs. Sterling." Isabel laughed, a sound that held more condescension than warmth. "That's admirable, I suppose. But tell me, have you ever wondered what it would be like to actually fly one of these instead of just cleaning it?" "I imagine it would be quite an experience," Oliver replied carefully. "Oh, I'm sure it would be," Isabel continued, her voice taking on a mocking edge. "In fact, I'll make you a deal, Oliver. If you can actually fly this helicopter, I'll marry you. How's that for motivation?" She laughed again, clearly enjoying what she saw as a harmless joke at the expense of the building's maintenance staff. "Of course, that's assuming you could even figure out how to start the engine, which I seriously doubt." Oliver studied Isabel's face, seeing the casual cruelty that came from someone who had never known what it meant to be underestimated. For a moment, he considered walking away, maintaining the quiet anonymity that had served him well for the past 3 years. But something in her dismissive laughter stirred memories he'd worked hard to keep buried. "Ms. Sterling," Oliver said quietly, "are you serious about that offer?" Isabel's eyebrows rose in surprise. "What about marrying you?" "Oliver, I was joking. You're a janitor, for heaven's sake." "I understand that," Oliver replied, his voice maintaining the same respectful tone. "But you did make the offer, so I'm asking if you're serious." Isabel stared at him for a moment, then burst into laughter. "Oh my God, you actually think you could fly this helicopter?" "Oliver, this is a complex piece of machinery worth over $500,000. It requires years of training, federal licensing, thousands of hours of flight experience." "I understand the requirements," Oliver said simply. "Fine," Isabel said, her amusement turning to something sharper. "You know what? Let's make this interesting. I'll even sweeten the deal. If you can not only start this helicopter, but actually perform a complete flight pattern around the city and land it safely back here, I'll not only marry you, I'll make you vice president of the company." She crossed her arms, clearly enjoying the absurdity of the situation. "But when you can't even figure out which button starts the engine, you quit. Tonight. No severance, no references. Just pack up your cleaning supplies and disappear." Oliver was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving from Isabel to the helicopter and back again. "And if I can do what you're asking? Then I suppose I'll have learned something about making assumptions," Isabel said with a smirk. "But Oliver, be realistic. You're talking about flying a helicopter. This isn't a video game." Oliver nodded slowly, then walked toward the aircraft. "Ms. Sterling, I'd like to take you up on your offer." Isabel followed him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and anticipation. She pulled out her phone, clearly planning to record what she expected to be an embarrassing failure. Oliver approached the pilot's door with the same careful attention he'd shown during his maintenance checks. But now his movements carried a different quality, a confidence that seemed to emerge from somewhere deep within him. He opened the door and slid into the pilot's seat with practiced ease, his hands moving automatically to adjust the seat and mirrors. Isabel watched from beside the aircraft, her phone recording, as Oliver began what appeared to be a genuine pre-flight check. Fuel levels, oil pressure, hydraulic systems, Oliver murmured to himself, his voice carrying the rhythm of long-established routine. Battery voltage, altimeter setting, radio frequency. Isabel's smirk began to fade as she watched Oliver's hands move across the instrument panel with unmistakable familiarity. This wasn't the fumbling of someone pretending to know what they were doing. This was the systematic check of an experienced pilot. "Oliver," she said, her voice less certain now. "What are you doing?" "Pre-flight inspection," Oliver replied without looking up. "Always check your instruments before starting the engine. Basic flight safety." He reached for the ignition sequence, and the helicopter's engine began its distinctive whining startup cycle. The rotor blades began to turn slowly, then faster, until they became a blur of motion above their heads. Isabel stepped back, her phone still recording, but her expression shifting from amusement to confusion. "How do you know how to do that?" Oliver's hands moved across the controls with the fluid precision of thousands of hours of experience. "Ms. Sterling, you might want to step back a bit further. Rotor wash can be pretty intense." As the helicopter lifted smoothly from the helipad, Isabel stood transfixed, watching her janitor execute a perfect takeoff. The aircraft rose vertically, hovered for a moment, then began a graceful circuit around the city skyline. From her position on the rooftop, Isabel could see the helicopter moving through the air with professional precision, following standard flight patterns and maintaining proper altitude and speed. This wasn't luck or beginner's fortune. This was the work of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. 20 minutes later, the helicopter returned, approaching the landing pad with the kind of smooth, controlled descent that spoke of serious training and experience. Oliver set the aircraft down with barely a bump, the landing so gentle that a champagne glass wouldn't have spilled. As the rotors wound down and the engine died, Oliver climbed out of the pilot's seat and walked toward Isabel, who stood motionless, her phone hanging forgotten in her hand. "Flight complete, Ms. Sterling," Oliver said quietly. "Perfect weather conditions, no mechanical issues, fuel consumption within normal parameters." Isabel stared at him, her mind struggling to reconcile the man she'd just watched fly a helicopter with the janitor she'd been dismissing for years. "Who are you?" Oliver looked out over the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. "Major Oliver Grant, United States Army, retired, former chief helicopter pilot for the 82nd Airborne Division, 19 years of service including 4 combat deployments, over 8,000 flight hours in everything from utility helicopters to attack aircraft." Isabel's legs felt suddenly unsteady. "But you're a janitor." "I am now," Oliver confirmed. "After I retired from the Army 3 years ago, I needed work while I figured out what to do with the rest of my life. Maintenance work lets me stay close to aircraft while I decide if I want to go back to flying professionally." "But why didn't you tell anyone? Why work as a janitor when you have skills like this?" Oliver's expression softened slightly. "Because I've spent 19 years being defined by what I could do in the air. I wanted to find out who I was when I was just a man doing honest work, without anyone's expectations or assumptions getting in the way." Isabel looked from Oliver to the helicopter and back again, her worldview tilting on its axis. "You let me mock you. For years I've treated you like you were less than me." "Ms. Sterling," Oliver said gently, "you treated me exactly the way you see janitors. The problem isn't that you didn't know my background. The problem is that you think someone's worth is determined by their job title." Isabel felt heat rise in her cheeks as the truth of his words hit home. "Oliver, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Oliver replied. "But you might want to think about whether the way you treat people reflects the kind of person you want to be." As they stood on the rooftop in the gathering twilight, Isabel realized that the most important lesson of the evening wasn't about making assumptions. It was about recognizing that everyone around her had depths and stories she'd never bothered to discover. "Oliver," she said quietly, "about that offer I made,